Hi everyone, this is Michelle with Purposeful Happiness, and I have been asked to post a video on the construction of these journals, more of a process journal. I would say that these are so easy and so fun to make that if you have kids home this summer who would like to make their own journal, boys or girls, I highly recommend them. They're very easy and fun to put together with a big impact. Now, I will quickly show you what supplies you'll need and what I used. I have two larger books and then one mini, and today I'll work on another mini. But inside, I just used the book cloth, and you can tell I got a little sloppy with the Mod Podge, and then tempered hardboard for the cover. And that worked beautifully for adhering all of these different fabrics. For the minis, I didn't have the tempered hardboard available in that size, so I just used a small, heavy chipboard cut to size. And again, I will go through what supplies you need and then assemble the book. So I'll just set these aside. I am going to use for this mini book 2 tempered hardboard pieces with a 1.5 inch spine. And I have a little bit of book cloth left, so I'm just going to use this and assemble the book like this. Now, you can use a cloth book that you've taken all the pages out and you're able to paint on, but just make sure it's cloth so that everything will adhere well. You can buy book cloth by the quarter yard, and so I have a couple of rolls of these and they take paint beautifully, so no problem there. Now for your dragon, the supplies are really minimal. Once you figure out what you want and where to go to get them, I have a local gem shop that she makes or sells these dragon eyes, and then I have painted my own eyes as well on the Cabochon bead, and I don't think I'm saying that right, but that's just what this is. And you can order those online or look around to your local bead shops and they may have some for you to paint. And there's a tutorial that I'll post at the bottom of this video on who I think has the best way to paint these eyes, and all of that's just using nail polish. So the other thing that I use for the very base of the dragon is just plain old tissue paper that I have from a pattern, so cheap, you can get a bunch of it. And what I've done is I just cut some squares up, just enough to create some texture. You can, sometimes I'll take it while I'm working on the dragon and I'll wrinkle it and bring it back out, because when you're done, it gives a really neat effect inside of some of the tissue paper pieces. And you probably can't see on this, but you'll see when you're doing it yourself that it really gives more dimension to your project. And just little pieces of cheesecloth is all that is. And I dried some eggs. I don't use too many of the eggshells, but I'll use them in little patches around the dragon. And then I found this roll of just a wire at Joann's, and I'm sure Hobby Lobby has it or something around your house. But what I've done with that is I will use this little mechanism and the texture paste, and I'll just use this as sort of a stamp to stick in as I'm working around the paste and give it what I think to be a scaly look. So first off, what I will do, and of course you'll need just basic paint brushes for your Mod Podge, scissors, and Fabri-Tac if you use it. I will probably Mod Podge the eye onto the book, so I won't use the Fabri-Tac for this one, but you certainly could. And what I have done to start the construction of it is I've gone ahead and measured where I want the chipboard in the middle and on the edges. And the only thing I would caution you with using this type of hardboard is making sure that when you close the book, there's plenty of room between it and this other square piece. So just check to make sure you have enough room in between to close your book and it's still functionable. And I will be back with a book. Okay, as you see, I now have this mini book made, and should be plenty of room in between to open and close. The glue's still drying, so that'll be all right. And I went ahead and adhered the eye a little to the right and to the top of the front cover. So this is where it'll be when you look at it. You can put it anywhere you want. You can put it on your spine. It's completely up to you, and use your imagination to do whatever appeals to you. I am just going to pour some of the Mod Podge into an old yogurt lid so I don't get any crumbly pieces out of it. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to build up the eye using these little pieces. And you can certainly cut them down or make them bigger as you're working on this eye. So this will be the first part before we'll add these pieces for layering. So I'm just going to take it, I'm just going to put a little Mod Podge down on this cover. You use too much and everything really has a tough time sticking to it or adhering. So just go ahead and wrap, and this is where you're going to start forming the shape of your eye. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. And I'll take the Mod Podge and run it on top of this tissue paper again, just to make sure. Some of these pieces didn't have, or this end piece didn't have the Mod Podge underneath. So you don't have to be particularly neat about this. You're just building up your eye. And so you can still move it while the Mod Podge is wet. And then let's go ahead and do the bottom. And then that way we can figure out how to build up with our additional pieces. So I'm going to come across like this and just stick this down like so. And you'll have to work with it a little bit. It takes a minute for everything to dry and stay in place, especially on the first part where you have such thick tissue papers. Okay, so we're just going to keep pushing this down. And if it looks like your eye, that's too big for your eye, and you want to change it, any of these pieces will move and change. But we can continue to change the shape of this eye with layering. And of course, if you get anything on your eye, you can dip it in water, dip a brush in water, and then get it off. Very easy to do, but you have to stick with it. Alright, so this piece is giving me a little bit of trouble, which is fine. I'll just use my fingers for it. Make sure I can get this down. And probably I have too much Mod Podge and it's not drying for a minute. Okay, so what we'll do next is, you can see there's a little bit of Mod Podge on top of this after I went back over it. I'll just add a little more to that tissue paper, let it dry a little bit, and then I'm just going to come on top of that and add the eyelid onto this dragon eye. I'm not sure if you can see that. I'll hold it up here in a second. It's really more of a matter of just squishing and pinching your tissue paper to get it the way you want it to lay. And I like all of the twists in the tissue paper because it gives the eyelid a lot of dimension and character once we're completed. So I'll just hold this here for a second, and it's getting there. And if a piece doesn't want to stick, you can cut it, you can fold it, bend it, whatever you want to do to get that piece to lay flat. So as you can see, I have one piece layered on top, and we still have a little gap. So we'll close that with some of the flat pieces for the skin. So right now we're just still building up the shape of this eye. And of course, because I'm doing this on camera, it is not going as easily as my other books did, but we'll keep at it. Again, you can't really go wrong, so no sense in stressing out over the initial stages here. And I'm going to push it in. And this is where your opinion comes in. How do you imagine a dragon eye to look? That's it. And I imagine it to look a little bit like a reptilian eye. So I just come in and try to recreate that as close as I can. And then let that stick. So if you want to pinch that close, or you don't like the way that's opening, then you can take, these are easy to do, a little bit of filler here, and we'll just fill in the corner because I don't like that there's a big gap there. So I'm going to pinch this and add this other little one, give it a little different look, and then I'm going to fan this out. So as you can see there, anything goes. Really the tricky part is just making sure everything is adhered to your book cloth or your cover. Okay, I like that. One thing I like on my dragon eyes is a little bit more space between the skin and the eye. And I forgot to put this on the supply list, but I do use the Magic Dimensional inside of the eyes. You could use glossy accents too, or whatever you have on hand. So don't feel like you have to go buy anything in. This is just my preference. And so this is a smaller book, so I'm going to tear these up a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start adhering this and wrapping it around the eye. And like I said, we're going to cover some of the skin. And I'm okay if this folds, bends. See, it's wrinkly. Let's see if I can get closer. You can see that it's causing its own wrinkles inside of that tissue paper, which is fine. So here, you see I have a gap. And what I'll do is I'll just take this other tissue paper and turn around and use this as skin. And it will cover it right up, no problem. And I'll add more than just this one layer because I like the look of the crinkly tissue paper for the dragon skin. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So you saw that we had a big gap, and now that gap mostly closed. I had to look. So what I'm going to keep doing is just to make sure when you add these little extra pieces, it holds down these twisted edges that we did. So I'm just going to come back over the top of this gap I had and add a little bit of that skin right in. And if it goes off the edge of the book, no problem. You can either wrap it around into the inside cover, which would look great, or tear it, get it off. However you want to do it is fine. That's what I'm saying. This project, I think, would be so much fun for kids to do. It's so easy, and it really lets them get in and work with their hands and sculpting these little eyes and the materials. And so really, I'm just making sure if I see any place that looks like it's sticking up and not adhered, I'll Mod Podge that in. And we are just going to now continue to keep adding. And like I said, I like these to be wrinkled because the paint, when you get to the next video, really makes it look fabulous. So let's try one of those techniques where we'll crinkle up this tissue paper and then let's adhere it. Crinkly, that'll give me a really nice skin look. If this book was bigger, I wouldn't tear these into such small pieces, but this book is not, cover is not as big as the others. There we go. So we're just coming across, and I made a mistake on my other book. I don't know if it was a mistake or just my preference is, once I did these, to go up and all the way to the corner of this book. And you can see I didn't do that here, and I had to add just some paint, but I liked it on the first book. It went all the way across, and so I would recommend taking that texture paste or fabric, whatever, all the way across. And that is a little better. Alright, I'm new at doing videos, so I don't know if I'm getting all of the critical shots in. But we'll just keep going. And as you can see, this is really just a random fun process. And just adding some more skin. I should tear this back up. This is the first project I've used really using the texture paste, and I've been really impressed with how it looks on the books when you're done. And sturdy. Alright, so my plan is, if you watch the second video, what I do is I paint the book cloth black, and so any excess, and you know you're not going to cover up to that book, just go ahead and wipe some of that off. But most of mine will at least come off this little bit. Most of my pieces here. Okay, we're almost done with our tissue paper. I think the thing that takes the longest is waiting for it to dry, and then waiting for the painting with the silver gilded wax or gold, all the hills and valleys that you have inside of this texture. Okay, so I think we're probably okay here. Oops, and that's what I meant with the, I will just get that right off. I'm going to do a little bit more around the eye and bulk it up just a little bit more. This is my 4th dragon book, so there's, again, no real plan. I just know what my preference is for this to look like some sort of eye. There we go. And I've seen people on these use fabric and adhere it with glue, metal pieces, so it's whatever you have in your craft room or studio, whatever you're working in, anything goes. Okay, so what I do next is I'm going to have this cheesecloth, and I'm not going to put the cheesecloth on everything. I'm just going to strategically place it on a couple of spots where I want a little different texture. So I'm going to go a little on this top and just work with it, and I'll just Mod Podge that down as well. And it's okay if it's rolled and wrinkled. It's dragon skin, so no big deal. Just gonna clean off a little bit of that excess, and I am going to actually take this, and instead of cutting it, just wrap it back onto itself, back in the eye. And what'll be really neat is when you paint this, these little pieces here that you can see along this eye will look like little veins and just add to the look of the skin. And you can tell we're already getting a lot of texture just from the tissue paper. But I like the variation of texture between the cheesecloth and some of the eggshells. And we'll put those on next, and really that's almost all there is to creating this really fun cover. Okay, I think I'll just use a little piece. I want to get a little into the crack of this part of the eye. There we go. And maybe I'll cut another small piece. Just wherever you think it needs a little more dimension, add to it. I'm just going to put some right like that. And I think we have a little hole here, right in here. So let's just add a little bit. There we go. And I'll just cut a little bit of this off. All right. And I like for the cheesecloth to be off of the tissue paper and onto the book itself. It's fine. And now what we'll do is so this is the technique I've been using for these books. As you can tell, every time you do one, it's a completely different book. So sometimes it's a little tricky to get everything just right. But what I do with these eggshells is I decided that I was just taking a piece and breaking it onto the book, and I'm just sort of moving it apart from itself by pushing on it. I'm not doing anything too crazy, but then what I'll do is just take a little bit of that Mod Podge and put it over the top as well. And you can push it around with the Mod Podge, and as you can see, it gives it a little bit of a scaly look. Other people glue them on one by one. You can, you know, pick up your piece and place it in different places, but I like to do things quickly, so squishing it into a place that I know I want it to be is how I've been doing these. So I'm going to do this part of the eye, and so I'll just add some Mod Podge and go right over the cheesecloth. I'm going to grab one of these eggshells, and then I'm just going to start tapping on it to break it down. As you can go as small or as big as you want. And around the eye, I'm going to go a little smaller. And sometimes you have to get your brush out. And really just looks like scaly skin as you put this on. And you can see that it adds kind of a fun, different dimension. And so now I just go around, and if I have sort of a blank spot, I will either add some more tissue paper, some eggshells, and then just start moving them around. And spread them out a little bit so it doesn't look like you squished an egg on your book cover. There we go. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking we're going to do a little bit maybe right in the center here. And then as you do these projects, I always close the book to see if there's any sort of missing spots in here. And I'm sorry if the table's shaking. I didn't realize it might be doing that until just now with these scales. Okay, smaller. And we'll add a big piece right here. Big scaly chunk. And I'm just gonna, oops, a little bit much on the Mod Podge. Just cover those a little bit so that they are going to stick. And I think let's do a little bit here as well. Really, at this point, you're just going around and looking at big empty spots or places you want some more texture and add to it. And I kid you not, any supply you have on hand will work. You could cut out dragon scales out of a, chipboard or another medium and layer them on that way. There's all sorts of ways to do that. So this is where I'm at with it so far. And now when I close the book, it gives me an idea of where the spine is pretty dull. Nothing going on there. So I think I need a little more on the spine. So I'm going to put a little bit of this dragon scale down with the eggshells. If you don't know how to dry eggshells, it's really pretty easy. You just empty it out and then soak the eggshells in water. And at that point you can pull the membrane out from inside of the egg. There's a membrane that lines it. And then let it dry and it's fine. Let's see. Okay. So this is what we have here. And don't forget we have the texture paste too. So make sure I get this adhered. Go ahead and pick up your book and just make sure when you fold it, everything looks like it's on. And you can feel the eye. If there's anything you don't like about it, change it. But this is where I think it gets really fun. This is a really fun technique to add a lot of dimension to your work. With this texture paste, and a little bit goes a long way, so I learned that the hard way. I ended up with like a 1/2 inch thick of this paste. So you can cut this wire, whatever you're going to use for a stamp, into any size. But what I do know is I want this texture to come up on the eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bend this wire and place it wherever I want. So I'm going to use this and just frost it like a cake. That keeps me from blobbing too much on, I found. So I'm just going to come in and I'm pushing down on the wire. And as you can see, this isn't quite enough. You get a little bit of the indentation. I don't know if you can tell on the camera. But I definitely need more paste to get a little more effect out of that. So what I'll do is I'll come back and I'll put this down, and you can just keep going over it. You can, if you get too much, spread it out further across the book. And you want some of these pokey parts to stick out. And we'll see. You'll be able to see on this one. It's much better. You get a lot of hills and valleys and texture. And what I would do is, if I didn't like the stamping of it, or I think it's just a big blob, I just come back in and I'll stick it in and plop it right on there. And so there's a big spot missing over here. And the eye's a little difficult because it's 3-dimensional anyway, so you have to work a little bit to get that one just the way you want. And I just put these scales in random places. And so you can see this one has the stamp in it. I think you can see. But that it's not that thick. The eye is definitely thick. Probably that will take 2 days to dry since I put too much on. But I also want to put, anywhere I don't really have anything, I'm going to put some of this texture paste in and add to the project. And I'm doing this upside down, and I'm feeling that's a bad idea. Alright, so I'm just going to, same thing, frost it on and up through the scales of this little stamp, or I don't know, wire. Okay, there's that. And again, if I were to close this book, I don't have anything on, oops, sorry, the spine. So I'm going to come in and do it, I think, right about here, and come down a little bit more. And I need a little bit more than that, because all it did was I squished it completely down. There we go. And I'm just gonna come in here and do a couple of stamping. Again, it's just, you look at it and you decide you want it to look a little bit more prehistoric or more, you know, skin on it. Now's the time to adjust it. Once this stuff dries, it is not coming off. There we go. And that is actually probably all that I will do on this cover. And it will be ready to paint in a day or two. I just let this texture paste will turn completely clear. And once that's completely clear, you're ready to paint. And then that is a close-up of once the paint is on, and then the black cover. And that is it. Thank you very much.